Today is Labor Day in the United States, but I want to talk about a bit of British labor history, an unlikely alliance between a group of radical young queer activists in London and a group of striking miners in South Wales. Lesbians and gays support the miners. Welcome back to Yesterqueers. My name's Amanda, and I'm a public historian of queer history. The most bitter industrial dispute in British history began on March 6, 1984, when workers at the Cortonwood Colliery in South Yorkshire walked out to protest the planned closure of coal pits in England, Scotland, and Wales. The coal industry had been nationalised in the UK after World War II, and the closures were part of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher's free market economic agenda. I know it's weird to see signs that say coal is the future of energy, but remember, this was 40 years ago, and the government's closure plan had nothing to do with environmental concerns. Soon, there were 100,000 coal miners on strike across the UK, and the British government's response was swift and brutal. In addition to using police to physically break picket lines and the tabloids to smear coal miners, Thatcher's government also froze the National Union of Mine Workers funds. Not only could the union not use their own money to support miners and their families during the strike, supporters of the strike couldn't donate to the union. Instead, support groups had to take up collections directly and then figure out how to get that money to the miners and families who needed it the most. And this was decades before Venmo or GoFundMe. A flamboyant young activist and communist named Mark Ashton and his friend Mike Jackson decided to take up a collection for the miners during the London Pride Parade in June of 1984. They were taken aback by how generous everyone was, but their wheels really started to turn after the parade. A miner from Kent was speaking at the London Student Union, which was near the termination of the parade route, and the audience was packed with queer people who were energized to help fight for the miners. Mark decided to hold a meeting at his house the following Sunday to talk to queer activists about supporting the miners, and within a month, they had formed Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners. They had a written constitution, they had a bank account, and they had all of the money that they'd raised at Pride and in the weeks since. What they didn't have was a place to send the money. Fortunately, one of the people who'd attended that first LGSM meeting was a fellow member of the Communist Party of Great Britain, and he knew another member of the party who was involved in the Neath, Delhi, and Swansea Valley Miner Support Group. South Wales was affected more dramatically by the decline of the coal industry after World War II than any other part of the UK. By 1984, Delhi and the neighbouring Neath and Swansea valleys were small, insular communities that had already been fighting to keep their heads above water before the strike was called. The South Wales valleys seemed like the perfect place for LGSM to support, but the London activists wanted to make sure that their efforts were going to a community who would recognise and respect them. So Mike Jackson sent a letter to the miners' support group introducing the LGSM and asking to formalize the relationship between the two groups. According to Sean James, an eventual Labour MP from Swansea who was a young mother at the time of the strike, there were some crude jokes in the meeting where that letter was read because coal mining was an extremely macho industry and homosexuality was seen as a city thing. But James was also quick to clarify that no one was outright nasty. People were uncomfortable and confused as to why a bunch of young queer people in London cared about miners in South Wales. They cared because queer activists, especially those who were also involved in communist or socialist politics, understood that Thatcher's government was using tools that had been sharpened on the queer community to cut down the miners, and that if left unchecked, the Tory government was going to use those same tools to destroy Britain's working class. After that meeting, where everyone worked out their concerns, the Neath, Delhi, and Swansea Valleys Miner Support Group agreed to a formal partnership with Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners. The first time that 30 or so members of the LGSM showed up in Delhi was a bit of a clash of cultures, but both residents and members of the LGSM said that the initial awkwardness faded pretty quickly. The women of the valleys, in particular, were very welcoming to the LGSM. Sean James said in an interview, friendships were made very, very quickly. We asked them about where they were from, why they wanted to be involved, and what had made them support the miners. And that's when we started to realize that they had the same core values, and their sexuality and their lifestyles weren't the things that connected us. Over the course of the strike, Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners, along with a spin-off group called Lesbians Against Pit Closures, raised more than £22,000 to keep the miners' families in the South Wales valleys clothed and fed. The Pits and Perverts benefit concert held at the Electric Ballroom in Camden Town raised £5,000 alone. LGSM also donated a minibus to the support group that they used to deliver supplies and travel to speeches and rallies. The strike ended in March of 1985, unfortunately with a resounding victory for Thatcher and the Conservative Party that weakened unions across the United Kingdom. But the alliances forged between labor activists and queer activists endured, and it is largely because of Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners that Britain's Labour Party took up LGBTQIA+ rights as part of their platform. And for once, I can say that a movie has been made about this story, and it is great. It's called Pride. It came out in 2014, and it stars Bill Nye, Imelda Staunton, Dominic West, and Andrew Scott, among others. And it is available to stream in the United States. That's it for today. As always, more information, including sources and further reading, is available in the usual place.